Chapter 1, The Abandoned Park. The Carnival lights had once blazed brightly against the night sky, their vivid colors painting a picture of joy and exuberance. Now, the Grand Oak Amusement Park stood as a ghostly monument to a bygone era, its attractions forlorn and draped in the shroud of neglect. The Ferris wheel, once a marvel of height and wonder, creaked and groaned with the wind, its cars swaying like forgotten relics of laughter long silenced. Sullivan had always been intrigued by the tales of the abandoned amusement park on the edge of town. As a local journalist with a penchant for the macabre, she had heard the stories of the park's sudden and unexplained closure years ago. Rumors spoke of vanished visitors and strange occurrences that drove people away. Now, drawn by both curiosity and a sense of professional duty, Rebecca had ventured into the deserted grounds. Under the cloak of dusk, Rebecca walked through the entrance gate, which was rusted and barely hanging on its hinges. The ground beneath her feet was uneven, covered in overgrown weeds and the detritus of forgotten joyrides. The distant hum of the broken-down carousel, still emitting an occasional discordant note, sent shivers down her spine. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows on the dilapidated rides. The park seemed frozen in time, a snapshot of a happier era marred by the passage of years and the whispers of something sinister. Rebecca's breath came in visible puffs as she moved closer to the center of the park, where the old carousel stood, an ornate, once majestic ride now shrouded in layers of dust and decay. The carousel's wooden horses, their once vibrant colors now dulled and chipped, seemed to watch Rebecca with hollow eyes. The intricate carvings of mythical creatures and delicate flowers were barely discernible under the grime. Yet, despite its dilapidated state, the carousel seemed to hold a certain magnetic pull, as though it were beckoning her closer. As she approached, the carousel's lights flickered on, casting an otherworldly glow over the scene. The sudden illumination was both startling and unnerving. Rebecca's flashlight wavered as she tried to adjust to the unexpected brightness. She could feel the chill of the evening air intensify, and the carousel's music, though warped and ghostly, began to play a hauntingly familiar tune. Rebecca's heart raced as she stepped closer, her mind racing with a mixture of fear and fascination. She reached out to touch one of the carousel's horses, and as her fingers brushed against the cold, cracked wood, a sudden, bone-chilling breeze swept through the park, extinguishing the lights and plunging her into darkness. Chapter 2, The Whispering Voices. The darkness enveloped Rebecca, leaving her disoriented and anxious. The air grew heavier, filled with the faint sounds of whispers that seemed to float just beyond her hearing. The whispers were soft and indecipherable, like fragments of a forgotten conversation carried by the wind. Rebecca fumbled for her flashlight, her hands trembling as she tried to turn it back on. The beam flickered to life, casting a weak light that barely penetrated the surrounding blackness. The carousel was now an imposing silhouette against the dark sky, its horses standing still and silent. As Rebecca tried to steady her nerves, she heard a rustling sound nearby. She turned sharply, her flashlight illuminating a small, tattered tent that had been forgotten in the overgrown weeds. The tent was faded and worn, its once bright colors now muted and drab. With a deep breath, Rebecca approached it, driven by a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Inside the tent, she found a collection of old Carnival games and prizes, their once cheerful appearance now tainted by the passage of time. A dusty mirror hung from the wall, its surface cracked and smeared. Rebecca's reflection in the mirror appeared distorted, her features twisted in a grotesque manner that made her shiver. As she moved closer, the whispers grew louder, coalescing into a coherent voice that seemed to come from the mirror itself. "Leave this place," it urged, its tone both mournful and menacing. "The carousel holds our souls. The park is cursed." Rebecca backed away from the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers continued, growing more insistent and desperate. The atmosphere in the tent was thick with a palpable sense of dread, and Rebecca could feel the weight of the unseen presence pressing in on her. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the carousel, illuminating the park in an eerie, ghostly glow. The carousel began to turn slowly, its horses moving with a lifelike grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. The distorted melody of the carousel music filled the air, growing louder and more dissonant. The whispering voices seemed to merge with the music, creating a cacophony of sound that filled Rebecca's mind. She stumbled out of the tent, drawn irresistibly back toward the carousel. Her flashlight flickered wildly, casting erratic beams of light that danced with the shadows. Chapter 3: The Ghostly Carousel. Rebecca stood in awe as the carousel continued its eerie rotation. The horses, once lifeless and abandoned, now seemed to be animated by some unseen force. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and their mouths were twisted into silent, spectral smiles. The music from the carousel was no longer just an eerie tune, it had transformed into a mournful wail, a lamentation that seemed to echo through the very fabric of the park. The notes rose and fell in a haunting melody, each one carrying a note of sorrow and despair. Rebecca approached the carousel cautiously, her flashlight flickering as if it were struggling against the oppressive darkness. The horses moved with a haunting elegance, their movements synchronized in a grotesque dance. She noticed that the carved details on the horses' bodies seemed to shift and change, revealing glimpses of anguished faces and tortured souls. As she stepped closer, the whispering voices returned, more distinct than before. They seemed to be coming from within the carousel itself, a chorus of mournful pleas and desperate cries. "Help us," they begged. "Set us free!" The lights on the carousel grew brighter, casting long, shifting shadows across the park. Rebecca felt a chill running down her spine as she noticed that the shadows seemed to take on a life of their own, twisting and writhing like living entities. Suddenly, one of the horses turned its head toward Rebecca, its eyes glowing with an intense, unnatural light. The sight was both mesmerizing and horrifying. The horse seemed to beckon her, its carved mouth moving as if to speak, though no sound emerged. Rebecca's fear was palpable, yet she felt an inexplicable compulsion to approach the horse. As she reached out to touch it, the carousel's music reached a crescendo, and the park was bathed in a blinding light. The light seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. In the midst of the light, Rebecca saw a vision, a swirling maelstrom of past carnival goers and park staff, their faces twisted in anguish as they reached out to her. The vision was fleeting but intense, and it left Rebecca with a profound sense of sorrow and urgency. Chapter 4: The Soul of the Park. As the blinding light faded, Rebecca found herself standing in a surreal, otherworldly landscape. The park had transformed into a distorted reflection of its former self, its rides and attractions now ghostly apparitions amidst a swirling fog. The once familiar grounds were now alien and menacing, a place where reality seemed to bend and warp. The carousel was still spinning, but its music was now a mournful dirge, resonating with an unsettling gravity. The horses had become spectral figures, their eyes glowing with a sorrowful intensity. The whispers had coalesced into a single, coherent voice that seemed to come from the heart of the carousel. "You have seen the truth," the voice intoned. "The park was cursed long before it was abandoned. Our souls are trapped here, bound by the malevolent force that lurks within." Rebecca's heart raced as she tried to make sense of the vision. She could feel the weight of the souls trapped within the park, their suffering and anguish pressing down on her. The air was thick with a palpable sense of despair, and the fog seemed to carry the echoes of countless lost souls. Desperate to find answers, Rebecca moved toward the center of the distorted park, where a central structure seemed to draw her in. It was an old, decrepit building, its facade adorned with faded carnival banners and broken windows. The building seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, as if it were the source of the park's curse. Inside, Rebecca found a hidden chamber, its walls covered in strange symbols and arcane markings. The symbols glowed with a faint, otherworldly light, and the air was filled with a heavy, oppressive silence. At the center of the chamber was an ornate altar, its surface covered in dust and cobwebs. The whispers grew louder as Rebecca approached the altar. The voice spoke with a tone of desperate urgency. "The curse can only be broken if you free us. You must perform the ritual and release the souls trapped within." Rebecca's hands trembled as she examined the altar. On its surface was an ancient book, its pages filled with cryptic instructions and rituals. She knew that the only way to break the curse was to follow the instructions and perform the ritual. With a deep breath, Rebecca began the ritual, reciting the incantations and performing the necessary actions. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, and the fog in the park seemed to clear. The carousel's music changed, transforming from a mournful dirge into a hopeful, uplifting melody. Chapter 5, The Breaking of the Curse. As Rebecca completed the final steps of the ritual, a profound sense of calm and relief filled the park. The oppressive darkness began to lift, and the once ghostly carousel transformed into a vibrant, restored version of its former self. The spectral horses were replaced by their original, colorful counterparts, and the lights of the park flickered back to life. The voices that had once filled the air with despair were now silent, replaced by a serene and comforting silence. The fog that had shrouded the park lifted, revealing the familiar sights of the Grand Oak Amusement Park as it had once been, a place of joy and wonder. Rebecca stood amidst the transformed park, her heart filled with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. The souls that had been trapped within the park were finally free, their anguish lifted by the completion of the ritual. The park's curse had been broken, and the malevolent force that had haunted it was no more. As Rebecca walked through the park, she could feel a sense of peace and renewal. The once abandoned rides and attractions were now vibrant and full of life. The Grand Oak Amusement Park had been restored to its former glory, a testament to the power of redemption and the triumph of light over darkness. Rebecca left the park with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The whispers and shadows of the past were gone, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. The Grand Oak Amusement Park would stand as a beacon of hope, a place where joy and wonder would once again flourish. As she drove away from the park, Rebecca glanced back at the now lively grounds, a small smile on her lips. The night had been a journey through darkness, but it had ended with the light of redemption and the promise of a new beginning.